Three-star athletes thought they could humiliate the quiet transfer student during lunch. They had no idea she was hiding a talent that would leave the entire school speechless and transform their lives forever. Maya Chen had perfected the art of invisibility long before she ever set foot in Clearwater Academy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 17, she possessed the kind of understated presence that allowed her to slip through crowded hallways unnoticed, her petite frame and soft-spoken demeanor making her nearly transparent to the casual observer. Her straight black hair fell like a curtain past her shoulders, and behind wire-rimmed glasses her dark eyes held depths that most people never bothered to explore. She preferred it that way. The private academy in Millfield, Vermont, represented everything Maya had never experienced in her previous schools. Where Lincoln High in Sacramento had been a sprawling public institution with over 3,000 students, Clearwater Academy housed barely 400 of the region's most privileged teenagers. The Gothic stone buildings and manicured lawns spoke of old money and older traditions, a world where family names carried more weight than individual accomplishments, and where social hierarchies had been established across generations of inherited status. Maya's arrival in late September came wrapped in the kind of family upheaval that left no room for gradual transitions. Her mother, Dr. Sarah Chen, had accepted a prestigious research position at the Vermont Institute of Technology, an opportunity too significant to refuse despite the timing. The move from California had been swift and necessary, leaving Maya to navigate the complex social terrain of an elite preparatory school where everyone had known each other since kindergarten. The scholarship that made her attendance possible at Clearwater Academy was both a blessing and a burden. It provided access to educational opportunities that would have been impossible otherwise, but it also marked her as an outsider among students who had never questioned their right to occupy these hallowed halls. The financial aid office had been careful to explain that her scholarship was merit-based, earned through exceptional academic performance and a particular talent that the academy valued highly, but Maya understood that such distinctions mattered little in the daily reality of teenage social dynamics. What none of her new classmates knew, what Maya had deliberately chosen not to reveal during her application process or orientation meetings, was that her acceptance to Clearwater Academy had little to do with her impressive grade point average or her thoughtful admissions essay. Hidden beneath her quiet exterior lay a gift that had already begun reshaping her understanding of the world around her, a talent so extraordinary that even she was still learning to comprehend its full implications. Maya possessed what psychologists called perfect auditory recall, combined with an intuitive understanding of human vocal patterns that bordered on the supernatural. She could hear a person speak for 30 seconds and reproduce not just their words, but their exact tone, inflection, accent, and emotional undertones with flawless precision. More remarkably, she could analyze the subtle variations in someone's voice to understand their emotional state, detect deception, and even predict their likely responses to different situations. The ability had manifested gradually during her early teenage years, beginning as an unusual talent for mimicry that her parents had initially dismissed as an entertaining party trick. But as Maya's skills developed, it became clear that she possessed something far more significant than simple vocal imitation. She could capture the essence of a person's communication style so completely that even close friends and family members could be convinced they were hearing the original speaker. During her sophomore year at Lincoln High, Maya had accidentally discovered that her gift extended beyond mere mimicry. While practicing impressions of her teachers in her bedroom, she had realized that she could predict with startling accuracy how each instructor would respond to different student questions or situations. The vocal patterns she absorbed contained layers of information about personality, emotional triggers, and decision-making processes that most people never consciously noticed. The discovery had been both thrilling and terrifying. Maya understood instinctively that such an ability carried enormous responsibility and potential for both good and harm. She could theoretically impersonate anyone whose voice she had studied, create false conversations, or manipulate situations through vocal deception. The ethical implications kept her awake many nights, wrestling with questions about the proper use of talents that seemed to exist in a moral gray area. Her parents had been initially skeptical when Maya first attempted to explain her abilities, assuming she was simply demonstrating an impressive but ultimately normal talent for vocal impressions. It wasn't until she perfectly reproduced a phone conversation between her mother and a colleague, capturing not just Dr. Chen's voice, but also her specific medical terminology and professional mannerisms, that they began to understand the true scope of their daughter's gift. The family had agreed to keep Maya's abilities private, understanding that such a talent could easily be misunderstood or exploited. They consulted with specialists in auditory processing and cognitive psychology, learning that Maya's combination of skills was extraordinarily rare and potentially valuable in fields ranging from linguistics to criminal investigation. But they also recognized that a teenage girl navigating the already complex world of high school social dynamics didn't need the additional burden of being known for such an unusual ability. The move to Vermont had provided an opportunity for a fresh start, a chance for Maya to attend an academically rigorous school where she could focus on her studies without the complications that might arise from revealing her true talents. The admissions committee at Clearwater Academy had been impressed by her academic record and her thoughtful essay about overcoming challenges, but they had no idea that the quiet girl from California could reproduce their own voices so perfectly that their families wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Maya's first weeks at Clearwater Academy had been a masterclass in careful observation and strategic invisibility. She attended her classes diligently, completed her assignments with the kind of thoroughness that impressed her teachers without drawing excessive attention, and gradually began mapping the complex social landscape of her new environment. The school's student body was divided into clearly defined groups, each with its own territory, traditions, and unspoken rules about interaction with outsiders. At the apex of Clearwater Academy's social hierarchy stood the Trinity, three senior athletes whose combination of family wealth, athletic achievement, and charismatic leadership had made them the undisputed rulers of student social life. Tyler Brennan captained the lacrosse team and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never encountered a challenge he couldn't overcome through determination or family connections. His father owned the largest construction company in 3 counties, and the Brennan name appeared on buildings throughout Vermont. Alongside Tyler stood Marcus Wellington, whose family's old money traced back to the earliest days of Vermont's statehood. Marcus played varsity tennis and sailed competitively during summers at the family compound in Newport, Rhode Island. His natural athleticism was matched by and sharp intelligence that made him formidable both on the court and in the classroom, though he rarely felt the need to exert himself academically given his guaranteed admission to Yale through family legacy. The third member of their triumvirate was Derek Sullivan, a hockey player whose combination of skill and aggression had already attracted interest from Division I college scouts. Derek's family had earned their wealth more recently through a chain of successful restaurants, but his athletic prowess and willingness to enforce the group's social dominance through intimidation had earned him a place among Clearwater Academy's elite. Maya had observed the Trinity's operations with the detached fascination of an anthropologist studying tribal behavior. They moved through the school's hallways like young royalty, their every gesture and expression carefully calculated to maintain their status while projecting effortless superiority. Other students stepped aside to let them pass, sought their approval for social events, and competed desperately for any sign of acceptance or recognition. The Trinity's power extended far beyond simple popularity. They influenced everything from which students received invitations to exclusive parties, to which teachers received gifts from grateful parents during holiday seasons. Their approval could elevate a social outsider to the ranks of the accepted, while their disapproval could transform a well-liked student into a pariah virtually overnight. Maya had no intention of seeking their attention, positive or negative. Her strategy for surviving Clearwater Academy involved maintaining perfect academic performance while remaining socially invisible, a approach that had served her well during her first month at the school. She ate lunch alone while reading, participated minimally in class discussions despite her thorough understanding of the material, and declined invitations to study groups or social gatherings that might increase her visibility among her peers. The strategy might have continued working indefinitely if not for the random cruelty that sometimes emerged from boredom among the privileged and powerful. Maya's careful invisibility was shattered on a gray October afternoon when the Trinity decided that the quiet scholarship student needed to be reminded of her place in Clearwater Academy's social order. The incident began during 4th period chemistry class, where Maya had been partnered with Jennifer Walsh, a junior whose father served on the Academy's board of trustees. Jennifer was pleasant enough, lacking the casual cruelty that characterized some of her wealthier classmates. But she also possessed the kind of thoughtless privilege that made her oblivious to the struggles of those less fortunate. Maya had been explaining the molecular structure they were supposed to identify when Jennifer interrupted with a question that had nothing to do with their lab assignment. "Maya, can I ask you something personal? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Jennifer's voice carried the kind of careful curiosity that suggested she had been wondering about this topic for some time. Maya looked up from their shared microscope, noting the way Jennifer's expression had shifted from academic focus to social interest. Such transitions rarely led anywhere positive in Maya's experience. "Sure," Maya replied cautiously, though every instinct told her to deflect the conversation back to their chemistry work. "How does it feel to be here on scholarship? I mean, do you ever feel like you don't belong? Or like people are judging you because your family can't afford the tuition?" The question hung in the air between them, like a toxic cloud, its casual cruelty wrapped in the guise of innocent curiosity. Jennifer seemed genuinely unaware that she had just reduced Maya's entire identity to her financial status, transforming her from a fellow student into an object of pity or sociological interest. Maya felt her cheeks flush with a combination of embarrassment and anger, but she forced her voice to remain steady as she responded. "I'm here because I earned it academically, just like everyone else earned their place through whatever combination of factors brought them here." Jennifer nodded thoughtfully, as if Maya's response was exactly what she had expected to hear. "That's so inspiring. I mean, it must be really motivating to work so hard when you know that this kind of education could completely change your family's circumstances. Do you feel pressure to succeed because so much is riding on your performance here?" The conversation was interrupted by Mr. Harrison's announcement that lab time was over and students should begin cleaning their workstations, but Maya could see that Jennifer's questions had drawn the attention of nearby classmates. Several students were now looking at her with the kind of calculating interest that suggested Jennifer's inquiries had reminded them of something they had temporarily forgotten. Maya spent the remainder of chemistry class acutely aware of the whispered conversations taking place around her, catching fragments of speculation about her family's financial situation and her reasons for attending Clearwater Academy. The careful invisibility she had maintained for weeks was evaporating before her eyes, replaced by the kind of unwanted attention that could make her remaining time at the school unbearable. The situation deteriorated further during the transition between 4th and 5th periods, when Maya found herself walking behind Tyler Brennan and Marcus Wellington as they made their way through the crowded hallway toward their respective classes. Their conversation was loud enough for surrounding students to hear, a strategic choice that Maya recognized as intentional performance rather than casual discussion. "I heard Jennifer Walsh was asking the scholarship girl about what it's like to be poor," Tyler was saying, his voice carrying the kind of amused contempt that suggested he found the topic entertaining rather than concerning. Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and deliberately cruel. "Maybe we should take up a collection, help her buy some decent clothes or something. I mean, she's representing the school now, right? We have standards to maintain." Maya felt her stomach clench as she realized that she had somehow become the subject of the Trinity's attention despite all her efforts to remain beneath their notice. The casual way they discussed her financial situation, as if she was an object rather than a person walking mere feet behind them, made her hands tremble with suppressed anger. She considered changing direction, taking a longer route to her next class to avoid continuing to walk behind them, but such an obvious retreat would only confirm their perception of her as weak and easily intimidated. Instead, Maya forced herself to maintain her normal pace while listening to their conversation continue. "The thing is," Tyler continued, "she's actually pretty smart. I heard she's already ahead of most seniors in calculus and physics. Makes you wonder what someone like that could accomplish if she had access to real resources instead of whatever bargain basement education she got in California." The backhanded compliment stung worse than direct insult would have, reducing Maya's academic achievements to products of natural ability rather than years of dedicated study. Tyler's tone suggested that he viewed her intelligence as an interesting anomaly rather than something deserving of respect or recognition. Marcus nodded sagely, playing his part in their theatrical discussion. "It's actually kind of sad when you think about it. All that potential, but she'll probably end up at some state school because her family can't afford anywhere better. Unless she gets really lucky with scholarships, I guess." Maya reached her AP History classroom and gratefully escaped their toxic commentary. but she could feel the effects of their attention already beginning to spread through the school's social network. Other students were looking at her differently now, some with sympathy that felt almost as degrading as the Trinity's contempt. Others with the kind of curiosity that suggested they were seeing her as entertainment rather than a fellow human being. During 5th period AP History, Maya tried to focus on Mr. Davidson's lecture about the Industrial Revolution, but she found herself analyzing the vocal patterns of her classmates' whispered conversations instead. Her unusual auditory abilities, normally under careful control, seemed to be responding to her emotional stress by amplifying every sound in the classroom. She could hear Jennifer Walsh 2 rows behind her, explaining to her friend Ashley Porter that she had been trying to be supportive by showing interest in Maya's background. Ashley's response carried undertones of social calculation, as she wondered aloud whether associating with the scholarship student might be seen as charity work that would look good on college applications. 3 seats to her left, she heard Michael Torres quietly telling his study partner that he had always suspected Maya came from a different economic background, but had respected her privacy too much to ask directly. His tone suggested genuine sympathy, but it was mixed with the kind of relief that came from having his suspicions confirmed rather than challenged. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up layer after layer of commentary, speculation, and analysis as her classmates processed this new information about her status at Clearwater Academy. Some conversations were cruel, others pitying, and a few genuinely supportive, but all of them reduced her to a single characteristic rather than seeing her as a complete person. The most painful realization was that her careful strategy of academic excellence paired with social invisibility had been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. In a school where everyone's family background was well known, her attempts to avoid discussing her personal circumstances had only made them more interesting to her classmates. Her silence on the subject had been interpreted as shame rather than privacy, creating exactly the kind of narrative she had hoped to avoid. When the final bell rang at 3:15, Maya gathered her books slowly, hoping to avoid the crowd of students rushing toward the exits. She had no desire to encounter the Trinity again today, and she certainly didn't want to field more questions from classmates who were suddenly fascinated by her financial situation. Her strategy of delayed departure worked initially, allowing her to walk through the emptying hallways without attracting attention. But as she approached the main exit, Maya realized that her day was about to become significantly more complicated. Tyler Brennan stood near the double doors that led to the parking lot, flanked by Marcus Wellington and Derek Sullivan in a formation that effectively blocked the primary exit from the building. They appeared to be engaged in casual conversation, but Maya recognized their positioning as deliberately strategic. They were waiting for her. Maya considered her options quickly. She could retreat and use one of the side exits, but that would mean a longer walk to the bus stop, and would probably be interpreted as cowardice by anyone who witnessed it. She could attempt to walk past them as if nothing had happened, though their body language suggested they had no intention of allowing her to simply ignore their presence. Or she could face whatever confrontation they had planned with the dignity and composure that her parents had taught her to maintain in difficult situations. Maya chose the third option, straightening her shoulders and walking directly toward the exit at her normal pace. Tyler's smile as she approached was the kind of expression that looked friendly from a distance but revealed its predatory nature up close. "Maya. Perfect timing. We were just talking about you." Maya stopped a few feet from their informal blockade, recognizing that any attempt to simply walk past them would be physically prevented. "What about?" Marcus stepped forward slightly, his movement casual but clearly designed to reinforce the message that Maya was surrounded. "We were discussing how we might be able to help you feel more welcome at Clearwater Academy. I mean, it must be tough being the only scholarship student in our grade." The casual assumption in his voice, the way he reduced her identity to her financial aid status, made Maya's jaw clench with suppressed anger. But she had learned long ago that showing emotion in situations like this only encouraged bullies to escalate their behavior. "I appreciate your concern," Maya replied evenly, "but I'm adjusting fine on my own." Derek Sullivan, who had remained silent during the initial exchange, now spoke for the first time. His voice carried a harder edge than his companions, suggesting that he was the enforcer of their group when subtlety failed to achieve their desired results. "See, that's where we disagree. You've been here for almost 2 months, and you still eat lunch alone every day. You don't participate in any extracurricular activities, don't socialize with your classmates, don't even try to fit in with the Clearwater Academy community. Maya felt a chill of recognition as she realized where this conversation was heading. The Trinity wasn't simply engaging in casual cruelty. They were building towards something more systematic and humiliating. Maybe you don't understand how things work here, Tyler continued, his tone taking on the patronizing quality of someone explaining obvious facts to a slow child. Clearwater Academy isn't just about academics. It's about building relationships, developing social skills, learning how to function in elite circles. By isolating yourself, you're wasting the opportunities that your scholarship is supposed to provide. Marcus nodded sagely, as if Tyler had just articulated profound wisdom. We've decided that you need guidance, someone to help you understand the social expectations that come with attending a school like this. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up the approach of other students in the hallway behind her, and she realized that the Trinity's timing was deliberate. They wanted an audience for whatever humiliation they had planned, understanding that public embarrassment would be far more effective than private intimidation. What kind of guidance? Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Derek's smile was sharp and cold as he responded. Tomorrow at lunch, you're going to sit with us in the dining hall. We'll introduce you to the right people, help you understand how to present yourself appropriately, teach you the social skills you'll need to succeed here. The offer was phrased as a kindness, but Maya understood the threat implicit in their words. This wasn't an invitation. It was a command disguised as generosity. The Trinity had decided to make her their project, their opportunity to demonstrate their power and benevolence by transforming the awkward scholarship student into someone more acceptable to their social circle. And if I prefer to continue eating lunch alone? Maya asked, though she already knew that her preferences were irrelevant to their plans. Tyler's expression shifted subtly, the facade of friendly concern giving way to something harder and more honest. Then I think you'll find that your time at Clearwater Academy becomes much more difficult than it needs to be. See, we have influence here. We can make sure that group projects exclude you, that social events forget to send you invitations, that teachers hear about your attitude problems from concerned classmates. Maya felt the familiar stillness that preceded her most difficult decisions settling over her mind. She could hear the voices of approaching students growing closer, could sense that their conversation was about to become a public spectacle. The Trinity had chosen their moment carefully, timing their confrontation to maximize both her humiliation and their demonstration of power. In that moment of perfect clarity, Maya made a choice that would change everything about her experience at Clearwater Academy. Instead of accepting their ultimatum or attempting to negotiate a compromise, she decided to trust in abilities that she had kept hidden since arriving in Vermont. "Thank you for the offer," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying just loud enough for the approaching students to hear. "But I think there's been a misunderstanding about who needs help with social skills." Tyler's eyebrows rose in surprise at her refusal, while Marcus and Derek exchanged glances that suggested they hadn't expected resistance to their generous offer of guidance. The approaching footsteps had stopped, and Maya could sense that a small audience was forming to witness whatever happened next. "I'm sorry," Tyler said, his tone taking on a dangerous edge. "Did you just suggest that we need help with social skills?" Maya met his gaze steadily, drawing on reserves of courage that she hadn't known she possessed until this moment. "I'm suggesting that truly confident people don't need to intimidate others to feel powerful. And people with genuine social skills don't need to humiliate scholarship students to prove their status." The hallway had gone completely silent except for the sound of Maya's words hanging in the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored or forgotten. She could see the shock registering on the Trinity's faces as they processed the fact that their carefully planned intimidation had just been turned back on them by the quiet girl they had assumed would be an easy target. Derek stepped forward, his athletic frame imposing in the confined space of the hallway, but Maya didn't retreat or show fear. Instead, she did something that no one at Clearwater Academy could have predicted or prepared for. Maya began to speak again, but this time her voice carried the exact intonation, accent, and emotional undertones of Tyler Brennan himself. When Maya spoke using Tyler's exact voice, the effect on the gathered students was immediate and profound. The small crowd that had assembled to witness what they expected to be a routine intimidation of the scholarship student instead found themselves staring in disbelief as Tyler Brennan's own words came flowing from Maya's lips with perfect precision. "Maybe you don't understand how things work here," Maya said, her voice an exact replica of Tyler's earlier patronizing tone. Clearwater Academy isn't just about academics. It's about building relationships, developing social skills, learning how to function in elite circles. The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler's face went through a rapid succession of expressions, from confusion to shock to something approaching fear as he processed what had just happened. Marcus and Derek stared at Maya as if she had just performed actual magic, their carefully constructed hierarchy of power suddenly feeling unstable beneath their feet. Maya continued speaking in Tyler's voice, but now she was saying words he had never spoken, phrases that revealed the ugly truth beneath his polished exterior. The thing is, we need people like Maya to feel inferior because it's the only way we can feel superior. Our families bought our way into this school, but she actually earned her place through merit. Students who had been gathering to watch the confrontation began pulling out their phones, recognizing that they were witnessing something unprecedented in Clearwater Academy's long history. The girl who had been invisible for 2 months was suddenly the center of attention, demonstrating an ability that none of them had ever seen before. Tyler found his own voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. "Stop. Stop that right now." Maya shifted seamlessly into Marcus Wellington's cultured accent and precise diction, the voice that had been bred through generations of private schools and summer homes. Actually, Tyler's right to be concerned. If word gets out that the scholarship girl can imitate our voices perfectly, people might start wondering what else she knows about us. The crowd was growing larger as word spread through the building that something extraordinary was happening near the main exit. Students who had been heading to their cars or buses were now pressing closer, their phones capturing every moment of Maya's unprecedented display. Derek Sullivan stepped forward aggressively, his hockey player's instincts telling him to end this confrontation through physical intimidation. But before he could speak, Maya began using his voice, complete with the slight Boston accent that he usually tried to conceal. The problem with bullies like us is that we're actually cowards underneath all the posturing. We pick on people we think can't fight back because deep down we're terrified that someone might discover how empty and insecure we really are. Derek's hands clenched into fists as he heard his own voice being used against him, speaking truths that he had never admitted even to himself. The gathered students were recording everything, and Derek understood that this moment would define his reputation at Clearwater Academy for the remainder of his time there. Maya returned to her normal voice, the sudden shift from Derek's Boston inflection to her own California accent serving as an exclamation point to her demonstration. Voice is just vibration patterns in the air. Once you understand how someone creates those patterns, reproducing them becomes a matter of physics rather than magic. Tyler was the first to recover from the shock, his quick mind already working to find a way to regain control of the situation. The crowd of students surrounding them represented both an opportunity and a threat, and he needed to act decisively before Maya's display completely undermined his authority. "Very impressive," Tyler said, forcing his voice to sound calm and unruffled despite the chaos in his mind. "I had no idea we had such a talented performer in our midst, but party tricks don't change the fundamental reality of your situation here." Marcus and Derek moved to flank Tyler, their formation designed to project unity and strength despite the psychological blow they had just received. The Trinity had built their power on the perception of invincibility, and they could not afford to let a single scholarship student shatter that illusion in front of half the school. Maya recognized that her demonstration had escalated the conflict beyond the point where any peaceful resolution was possible. The Trinity could not allow themselves to be publicly humiliated without consequences, and they would need to respond in a way that reasserted their dominance while punishing her for her defiance. "Tomorrow at lunch," Tyler continued, his voice taking on the hard edge that other students had learned to fear, "you'll have an opportunity to apologize for this little performance." In front of the entire dining hall. On your knees, the gathered students stirred uneasily at Tyler's ultimatum, recognizing that the situation had moved beyond verbal sparring into something much more serious. Maya felt the weight of dozens of eyes watching her, waiting to see how she would respond to a challenge that was designed to be impossible to accept. Maya looked around at the faces surrounding her, seeing a mixture of fear, excitement, and desperate hope in their expressions. Many of these students had been on the receiving end of the Trinity's cruelty at various points during their time at Clearwater Academy, but none had ever possessed the tools or courage to fight back effectively. "I'll see you tomorrow at lunch," Maya said simply, her voice carrying none of the bravado that Tyler might have expected. "But I won't be apologizing." Tyler's smile was sharp and cold as he processed Maya's response. Then you'll learn what happens to people who don't understand their place in the natural order of things. The crowd began dispersing as teachers started appearing in the hallway, drawn by reports of an unusual gathering near the main exit. Maya gathered her backpack and walked toward the doors, noting how the other students stepped aside to create a clear path for her passage. Their expressions ranged from admiration to terror, but none showed the casual indifference that had characterized their interactions with her just hours earlier. The bus ride home gave Maya time to process the implications of what had just happened. Her carefully maintained invisibility had been shattered beyond repair, replaced by a notoriety that would follow her for the remainder of her time at Clearwater Academy. The Trinity would not forget or forgive her public challenge to their authority, and she had no illusions about what tomorrow would bring. Her phone buzzed with notifications as videos of her voice demonstration began circulating through social media. Students who had witnessed the confrontation were sharing their recordings with friends and family, many adding commentary about the shocking abilities displayed by the quiet scholarship girl. Maya realized that her secret was now public knowledge, not just at Clearwater Academy but potentially far beyond the confines of her new school. Dr. Sarah Chen was waiting in the kitchen when Maya arrived home, her expression indicating that she had already received phone calls from concerned parents or school administrators. Maya's mother possessed the kind of analytical mind that had made her successful in scientific research, and she had clearly been processing the implications of whatever information she had received. "The school called," Dr. Chen said without preamble as Maya set down her backpack. "Principal Morrison wants to schedule a meeting tomorrow morning to discuss what he described as an incident involving unusual behavior and potential disruption to the learning environment." Maya sank into one of the kitchen chairs, feeling the weight of the day's events settling over her like a heavy blanket. She had known that using her abilities publicly would have consequences, but the speed with which those consequences were manifesting exceeded even her pessimistic expectations. "I can explain what happened," Maya said, though she wasn't entirely sure where to begin the story. Dr. Chen sat down across from her daughter, her expression shifting from concern to curiosity as she studied Maya's face. "Several parents have called to tell me that videos of you perfectly imitating other students' voices are circulating online. They seem to think you've been hiding some kind of extraordinary ability." Maya felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as she realized that her mother was approaching the situation with scientific curiosity rather than immediate judgment. Dr. Chen had always encouraged Maya to develop her talents, but they had never discussed the potential social and ethical complications that might arise from public displays of her voice mimicry abilities. "The Trinity decided to make me their project," Maya began, choosing her words carefully. "They wanted to humiliate me publicly, force me to sit with them at lunch tomorrow, and apologize for not knowing my place as a scholarship student." Dr. Chen's expression hardened as she processed the implications of Maya's explanation. "And you responded by demonstrating your abilities in front of other students." "I responded by showing them that their power depends on people being afraid of them. Once you can reproduce someone's voice perfectly, their words lose a lot of their intimidating effect." Maya spent the next hour explaining the details of her confrontation with the Trinity, from Jennifer Walsh's casually cruel questions about her scholarship status to Tyler Brennan's ultimatum about tomorrow's public apology. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, her scientific training allowing her to gather all available information before forming conclusions. "What do you think will happen tomorrow?" Dr. Chen asked finally. Maya considered the question carefully, drawing on her understanding of the Trinity's psychology and the social dynamics that governed Clearwater Academy. "They'll escalate. Tyler can't afford to let my challenge go unanswered, especially now that videos of what happened are spreading online. He'll need to reassert his dominance in a way that's visible and decisive." "And you're prepared for that escalation?" Maya met her mother's gaze steadily, recognizing that this conversation was about more than just tomorrow's confrontation. Dr. Chen was asking whether Maya was ready to accept the full consequences of having revealed her abilities, including whatever retribution the Trinity might devise. "I'm prepared to face whatever they have planned, but more importantly, I'm prepared to use my abilities to protect other students who can't protect themselves." Dr. Chen nodded slowly, her expression indicating that she understood and supported her daughter's decision despite the potential risks involved. "Then we should probably discuss strategies for tomorrow, and what you'll say to Principal Morrison when he inevitably asks about your plans. The evening passed in careful preparation as Maya and her mother discussed various scenarios and responses for the following day's challenges. Dr. Chen's scientific approach to problem-solving proved invaluable in helping Maya think through the potential consequences of different courses of action. Maya spent much of the night practicing her voice work, refining her ability to capture not just the surface characteristics of different speakers, but also the subtle emotional undertones that made her imitation so convincing. She had always possessed the technical ability to reproduce voices accurately, but the confrontation with the Trinity had taught her that psychological authenticity was equally important. The next morning brought an unseasonably warm October day, with brilliant sunshine streaming through the Gothic windows of Clearwater Academy as Maya made her way to Principal Morrison's office. The hallways buzzed with excited conversation as students discussed the previous day's events and speculated about what might happen next. Principal Morrison was a distinguished man in his 60s whose family had attended Clearwater Academy for 3 generations. His office reflected the school's traditions, with dark wood paneling and oil portraits of former headmasters creating an atmosphere of institutional authority. Maya suspected that many students found the environment intimidating, which was likely the intended effect. "Miss Chen," Principal Morrison said as Maya entered his office, "please have a seat. We have several matters to discuss." Maya settled into the leather chair across from his massive desk, noting that Dr. Chen had been invited to attend the meeting as well. Her mother's presence suggested that the administration viewed this as a serious situation requiring parental involvement. "I've reviewed the videos that were posted online last night," Principal Morrison continued, "and I must say that your abilities are quite remarkable. However, I'm concerned about the circumstances under which those abilities were displayed and the potential for disruption to our school community." Maya had expected this line of questioning and had prepared her response carefully. "I used my voice mimicry abilities to defend myself against bullying and intimidation. The Trinity was attempting to force me into a humiliating public apology for the crime of being a scholarship student." Principal Morrison's expression indicated that he had already heard different versions of yesterday's events from various sources, probably including phone calls from concerned parents whose children were members of the Trinity's social circle. "Tyler Brennan's parents have expressed concern that you used your abilities to impersonate their son in a way that could be considered identity theft or fraud. They're questioning whether someone with such capabilities can be trusted to interact normally with other students." Dr. Chen leaned forward in her chair, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with institutional politics. "Are you suggesting that my daughter should be punished for defending herself against bullying? Because that's what this situation really involves." Principal Morrison raised his hands in a gesture meant to calm the growing tension in his office. "I'm not suggesting punishment for anyone at this point, but I do need to understand what Miss Chen's intentions are regarding the use of her abilities going forward." Maya recognized that this was the crucial moment in their conversation, the point where her response would determine how the administration approached her situation. She could promise to keep her abilities hidden and hope that the Trinity would lose interest in tormenting her, or she could be honest about her plans to use her talents to protect other students. "My intention is to continue defending myself and others against bullying and intimidation," Maya said clearly. "I won't use my abilities to cause harm or create false evidence, but I also won't pretend to be helpless when people try to abuse their power." Principal Morrison studied Maya's face for a long moment, clearly weighing various factors in his decision about how to handle this unprecedented situation. Clearwater Academy prided itself on producing leaders and innovators, but the administration also needed to maintain the delicate balance of power that kept wealthy donors satisfied with the school's direction. "I'm going to allow you to continue attending classes normally," Principal Morrison said finally, "but I want to be clear that any use of your abilities that crosses ethical boundaries will result in immediate suspension and possible expulsion." Maya nodded her understanding, recognizing that the principal's decision represented a compromise that satisfied no one completely but avoided forcing an immediate crisis. She would be allowed to remain at Clearwater Academy, but under increased scrutiny that would make any future confrontations more complicated. The meeting concluded with warnings about appropriate behavior and reminders about the school's code of conduct, but Maya left Principal Morrison's office with the understanding that she had been given tacit permission to defend herself as long as she avoided obviously unethical applications of her abilities. The remainder of the morning passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances, as word spread that Maya had survived her meeting with the administration without facing serious consequences. Students who had previously ignored her existence now watched her movements with fascination, clearly wondering what other surprises the quiet scholarship girl might be hiding. Maya's enhanced hearing picked up fragments of speculation and planning throughout her morning classes, much of it centered on what might happen during lunch period. The Trinity had apparently spent the morning making it clear that they intended to follow through on their ultimatum, regardless of the administration's position on Maya's abilities. By the time the lunch bell rang, anticipation had reached fever pitch throughout Clearwater Academy. Students moved toward the dining hall with the excited energy of spectators heading to a gladiatorial contest, their phones already prepared to capture whatever dramatic confrontation awaited them. The dining hall at Clearwater Academy reflected the school's commitment to creating an atmosphere of refined elegance, even during casual meals. Long wooden tables stretched across a room dominated by tall windows and hanging banners representing various academic and athletic achievements. The space normally buzzed with the comfortable chatter of students enjoying their meals and social interactions, but today the atmosphere carried an electric tension that made every conversation feel like preparation for battle. Maya entered the dining hall carrying her usual brown bag lunch, her external composure masking the adrenaline that had been building since her meeting with Principal Morrison. She could see that the Trinity had positioned themselves at their customary table in the center of the room, surrounded by their usual collection of admirers and followers. Their body language projected confidence and control, but Maya's ability to read vocal patterns allowed her to detect the underlying anxiety in their conversations. The normal flow of student movement seemed disrupted as groups lingered near the entrance, clearly waiting to see where Maya would choose to sit and whether the promised confrontation would actually materialize. Maya recognized that her decision about where to eat lunch would send a message about her intentions, and that message would be analyzed and discussed throughout the school for days to come. Maya walked directly to her usual table near the windows, the same isolated spot where she had eaten alone for the past 2 months. Her choice to maintain her normal routine rather than seeking protection among a group of supporters sent a clear signal that she was prepared to face whatever the Trinity had planned without backing down or asking for help. The dining hall gradually filled with students, but the usual random distribution of seating arrangements had been replaced by a more deliberate organization. Students positioned themselves to have clear views of both Maya's table and the Trinity's central location, creating an arena-like atmosphere where the two focal points of conflict were surrounded by eager spectators. Maya unpacked her sandwich and began eating with deliberate calm, though her enhanced hearing was monitoring conversations throughout the room. She could hear Tyler Brennan explaining to his followers that the scholarship girl's disrespect could not be allowed to stand, that someone needed to remind her of the natural order that governs social interactions at Clearwater Academy. Marcus Wellington was holding court at a nearby table, his voice carrying the kind of cultured authority that came from generations of inherited privilege. The problem with people who don't understand their place, he was saying, is that they need to be taught through direct experience rather than gentle suggestion. Derek Sullivan's contributions to the pre-confrontation discussion were more direct and threatening, his hockey player's mentality reducing complex social dynamics to simple questions of dominance and submission. Maya could hear him outlining various strategies for public humiliation, each more elaborate and cruel than the last. The conversations Maya was monitoring suddenly stopped as Tyler Brennan rose from his seat and began walking toward her table. His movement triggered a ripple effect throughout the dining hall as other students fell silent and turned their attention to the unfolding drama. Phone cameras emerged from backpacks and pockets, ready to capture whatever happened next for immediate distribution across social media platforms. Tyler stopped directly in front of Maya's table, his imposing frame casting a shadow across her simple lunch. His expression combined false concern with barely concealed hostility, the kind of look that suggested he was about to deliver what he considered a necessary lesson in proper behavior. "Maya," Tyler said, his voice carrying easily across the now silent dining hall, "I notice you're still eating alone. Yesterday I offered to help you understand how social interactions work at Clearwater Academy, but you seem to prefer putting on a little performance instead." Maya looked up from her sandwich, meeting Tyler's gaze with steady composure despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes watching their interaction, could sense that students throughout the dining hall were holding their breath in anticipation of her response. "I remember your offer," Maya replied calmly, "and I remember declining it politely. I also remember explaining that confident people don't need to intimidate others to feel powerful." Tyler's smile sharpened at Maya's response, clearly recognizing it as another challenge to his authority that would need to be answered decisively. Marcus and Derek had risen from their seats as well, moving to flank Tyler in the same formation they had used during yesterday's confrontation near the main exit. "See, that's where you're wrong," Tyler continued, his voice taking on the patronizing tone that had triggered Maya's initial display of her abilities. "Confidence comes from understanding your place in the world and accepting the responsibilities that come with that position. Some people are natural leaders and others are natural followers. The problems arise when followers start thinking they can challenge the established order." Maya set down her sandwich and gave Tyler her full attention, recognizing that the confrontation she had been anticipating was finally beginning in earnest. The dining hall had become completely silent, except for the soft sounds of phones recording and the barely audible whispers of students commenting on the unfolding drama. "And what exactly are you proposing to do about followers who don't know their place?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Derek Sullivan stepped forward, his athletic frame and aggressive posture serving as a physical reminder of the Trinity's willingness to use intimidation to achieve their goals. "We think you need a more direct lesson in appropriate behavior. Something that will help you remember the importance of showing respect to your betters." Maya's enhanced hearing detected the sound of movement throughout the dining hall, as students shifted position to get better views of the confrontation. She could hear whispered speculation about what form the Trinity's lesson would take, with some voices expressing concern for her safety, while others seemed excited by the prospect of witnessing her humiliation. Tyler reached into his backpack and withdrew a container of chocolate pudding, the kind that was served as dessert with the Academy's catered lunches. His movement was casual and deliberate, designed to build suspense while demonstrating that whatever he had planned was premeditated rather than spontaneous. "The thing about people who don't understand social hierarchies," Tyler said, opening the pudding container with theatrical care, "is that they need lessons that are memorable and public. Lessons that other people can learn from as well." Maya understood immediately what Tyler intended to do, and she felt her stomach clench with a combination of anger and anticipation. The Trinity had chosen the most public possible venue for their retaliation, ensuring that their reassertion of dominance would be witnessed by the entire student body. Marcus Wellington had produced his own lunch item, a container of fruit salad that he was holding with the same deliberate care that Tyler was showing with his pudding. "We want to make sure this lesson reaches as many people as possible," Marcus said, his cultured voice carrying across the silent dining hall. "Education should be a shared experience." Derek Sullivan completed their preparation by retrieving a carton of chocolate milk from his lunch tray, his movements deliberate and threatening as he prepared to join whatever humiliation they had planned. The three members of the Trinity now stood around Maya's table, each holding food items that had been transformed from normal lunch components into weapons of social warfare. Maya remained seated, her posture calm and composed, despite the obvious threat facing her. Her enhanced auditory abilities were picking up layer upon layer of conversation from throughout the dining hall, students commenting on her apparent helplessness and speculating about whether she would attempt to use her voice mimicry abilities to defend herself. "Last chance to apologize," Tyler said, holding the pudding container directly above Maya's head. "Get on your knees, admit that you don't belong at Clearwater Academy, and promise to show proper respect to your betters. Do that, and we can all go back to our normal lunch routine." Maya looked up at Tyler's face, seeing the combination of cruelty and desperation that drove people to humiliate others for their own psychological benefit. She understood that accepting his ultimatum would provide temporary relief, but would also establish a pattern of submission that would make her remaining time at Clearwater Academy unbearable. "No," Maya said simply, her voice carrying clearly across the silent dining hall. Tyler's expression shifted from confident expectation to something harder and more dangerous as he processed Maya's refusal. The public nature of their confrontation meant that backing down was no longer an option for him. He had committed himself to a course of action that required follow-through regardless of the consequences. "Wrong choice," Tyler said, and turned the pudding container upside down. The chocolate pudding struck Maya's head and shoulders with surprising force, the cold dessert immediately beginning to drip down her face and onto her clothes. The impact was followed by Marcus's fruit salad, which added chunks of apple and grapes to the mess covering Maya's upper body. Derek's chocolate milk completed their assault, the liquid splashing across Maya's face and soaking into her hair. The dining hall erupted in gasps and exclamations as students processed what they had just witnessed. Phone cameras captured every moment of Maya's humiliation, ensuring that the Trinity's reassertion of dominance would be preserved and shared far beyond the confines of Clearwater Academy. Maya sat perfectly still for a moment, chocolate pudding dripping from her glasses onto her food-stained shirt. The physical sensation of being covered in sticky dessert and milk was unpleasant, but the psychological impact of public humiliation was far more significant. She could hear the mixture of laughter, gasps, and sympathetic murmurs from the students surrounding her, could sense that this moment would define her reputation at Clearwater Academy for years to come. Tyler stepped back to admire his handiwork, his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone who had successfully reasserted his authority after being challenged. Maybe next time you'll remember that scholarship students should show gratitude for the opportunities they've been given, rather than disrespecting the people who make those opportunities possible. Maya slowly removed her glasses and wiped the chocolate pudding from the lenses with a napkin, her movements deliberate and controlled despite the chaos of emotions coursing through her mind. When she put her glasses back on and looked up at Tyler, her expression carried none of the shame or defeat that he had obviously expected to see. Instead, Maya smiled. Maya's smile in the aftermath of her humiliation sent a chill through the dining hall that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. There was something unsettling about the way she sat there, covered in chocolate pudding and fruit salad, looking up at Tyler Brennan with an expression that suggested she knew something he didn't. Tyler felt his moment of triumph beginning to sour as he registered the complete absence of shame or defeat in Maya's demeanor. He had expected tears or anger, or at least the kind of broken submission that would confirm his restoration of the natural order. Instead, Maya was looking at him like someone who had just been handed an unexpected gift. "Thank you," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying clearly across the silent dining hall despite the chocolate pudding still dripping from her hair. "You've just given me exactly what I needed." Tyler's confusion was evident in his expression as he tried to process Maya's response. "What are you talking about?" Maya stood up slowly, chocolate milk and fruit pieces falling from her clothes onto the floor around her chair. Her movement was deliberate and controlled, and somehow the food covering her seemed to make her more intimidating rather than less. "You've just demonstrated to everyone in this room exactly who you really are," Maya replied, her voice beginning to shift and change in ways that made Tyler's stomach clench with sudden apprehension. "And now I'm going to show them who I really am." Maya's voice had transformed into Tyler's own, but it was Tyler's voice saying words he had never spoken, revealing thoughts he had never intended to share. "The truth is, I'm terrified that people will discover I'm not actually special. My family bought my way into this school, bought my place on the lacrosse team, bought every opportunity I've ever had." The dining hall erupted in shocked murmurs as students processed the fact that Tyler's own voice was confessing to insecurities and fears that he had spent years hiding. Tyler opened his mouth to protest, but Maya continued speaking in his voice, her words cutting through his attempted denials. "Maya Chen earned her place here through merit and hard work, while I've coasted on daddy's money my entire life. Deep down, I know she's everything I pretend to be but never could be, and that terrifies me more than anything else in the world." Tyler's face had gone pale as he listened to his own voice, revealing the psychological vulnerabilities that drove his need to dominate others. Students throughout the dining hall were recording every word, their phones capturing what appeared to be Tyler Brennan's complete psychological breakdown. "Stop," Tyler said, his actual voice sounding weak and desperate compared to the confident tones Maya was producing while using his vocal patterns. "Stop doing that right now." Maya shifted seamlessly into Marcus Wellington's cultured accent, the voice that had been trained through generations of private schools and exclusive social circles. "Tyler's absolutely right to be worried. If people realized how empty and meaningless our lives actually are, they might stop being impressed by our family names and start judging us based on our actual character." Marcus Wellington's mouth fell open as he heard his own voice discussing the hollowness that lay beneath his privileged exterior. The words were delivered with his characteristic precision and authority, making them sound like considered observations rather than hostile attacks. The Wellington family fortune was built on luck and timing 3 generations ago, Maya continued in Marcus's voice. Since then, we've done nothing but live off the accomplishments of our ancestors while contributing absolutely nothing meaningful to the world. Derek Sullivan stepped forward aggressively, his hockey player's instincts telling him to end this confrontation through physical intimidation. But before he could speak, Maya began using his voice, complete with the Boston accent he tried to hide, and the aggressive undertones that revealed his true nature. The only reason I hang around with Tyler and Marcus is because I'm too insecure to function without their approval, Maya said in Derek's voice. I know I'm the least intelligent member of our group, so I compensate by being the most willing to hurt people who threaten our status. Derek's hands clenched into fists as he heard his own voice articulating truths that he had never admitted even to himself. The psychological accuracy of Maya's observations was making his apparent confession even more devastating than simple mimicry would have been. Maya returned to her normal voice, the sudden shift from Derek's aggressive tones to her own calm California accent serving as an exclamation point to her demonstration. Voice patterns reveal everything about a person's psychology. Fear, insecurity, dishonesty, cruelty. It all comes through in the way someone speaks. The dining hall had become completely silent except for the sound of phones recording and the occasional whispered comment from students who were struggling to process what they were witnessing. Maya stood in the center of the chaos she had created, covered in food, but radiating a confidence that made her physical appearance irrelevant. Tyler was the first to recover from the shock, his quick mind already working to find a way to regain control of the situation. The crowd of students surrounding them represented both an opportunity and a threat, and he needed to act decisively before Maya's psychological warfare completely undermined his authority. Very clever, Tyler said, forcing his voice to sound calm and unruffled despite the turmoil in his mind. But impersonating people doesn't change the fact that you're still just a scholarship student who doesn't belong here. Maya tilted her head slightly, studying Tyler's face with the kind of analytical attention that made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. You're right that voice mimicry is just a party trick, but understanding the psychology behind vocal patterns? That's something much more powerful. Maya began speaking in Tyler's voice again, but this time her words carried an even more unsettling authority. For example, I can tell from the way your voice is changing right now that you're about to do something desperate. Your pitch is rising, your breathing is becoming shallow, and you're speaking faster than normal. Those are all signs that you're losing control. Tyler felt a chill of recognition as he realized that Maya's analysis was completely accurate. He was indeed feeling desperate, and apparently his voice was betraying his emotional state to someone who knew how to interpret the signals. You're also planning to escalate this confrontation physically, Maya continued in Tyler's voice, because psychological warfare makes you feel helpless and confused. You understand force and intimidation, but you don't understand how to fight someone who can turn your own words against you. Marcus Wellington had been listening to this exchange with growing alarm, recognizing that Maya possessed abilities that went far beyond simple voice mimicry. Her psychological insights were proving to be devastatingly accurate, and her ability to deliver those insights using their own voices was creating a surreal nightmare where their deepest insecurities were being revealed by their own apparent confessions. She's playing mind games, Marcus said, though his voice lacked the conviction that usually characterized his pronouncements. Don't let her get inside your head. Maya smiled and began speaking in Marcus's voice, her words delivered with his characteristic intellectual authority. Actually, Marcus is wrong about this being mind games. Psychology isn't a game, it's a science. And Maya clearly understands the science better than any of us understand ourselves. Derek Sullivan had heard enough. His hockey player's instincts were screaming at him to end this confrontation through direct action before Maya could cause any more psychological damage to their group's reputation. He stepped forward with the aggressive confidence that had served him well on the ice, reaching out to grab Maya's shoulder. Maya moved with surprising speed and precision, not to avoid Derek's grab but to position herself exactly where she wanted to be when it connected. As Derek's hand closed on her shoulder, Maya did something that no one in the dining hall could have predicted. She began screaming. But it wasn't Maya's voice that filled the dining hall with anguished cries. It was Derek Sullivan's own voice, perfectly reproduced, screaming words that painted him as a violent predator attacking an innocent victim. "Please don't hurt me!" Maya screamed in Derek's voice, the sound so convincing that several students jumped up from their tables in alarm. "I'm sorry I challenged your authority. Please don't hit me!" Derek jerked his hand back as if Maya's shoulder had suddenly caught fire, his face going pale as he realized what was happening. Maya was creating an audio record that would make it sound like Derek Sullivan was both attacking her and confessing to violent intentions, all while using his own voice. Maya continued her performance, switching between Derek's voice pleading for mercy and Tyler's voice making threats. "Shut up or I'll make this worse for you," Maya said in Tyler's voice, while simultaneously responding in Derek's voice. "I'll do whatever you want, just please stop hurting me." The effect on the gathered students was immediate and profound. Even though they could see that Maya was creating both sides of the apparent conversation, the psychological impact of hearing what sounded like the Trinity threatening and attacking a helpless victim was devastating to their carefully constructed image. Students who had been recording the confrontation for entertainment were now capturing what appeared to be evidence of assault and terroristic threats. Maya's performance was so convincing that several students had pulled out their phones to call for help, while others were moving toward the dining hall exits to summon teachers or administrators. Tyler realized that the situation had spiraled completely beyond his control. Maya's ability to manipulate vocal evidence meant that any physical interaction with her could be transformed into apparent proof of assault or harassment. She had turned her own victimization into a weapon that made her virtually untouchable. "Stop," Tyler said, his voice cracking with desperation. "Everyone can see what you're doing. Nobody's going to believe that we actually said those things." Maya returned to her normal voice, the sudden silence after her screaming performance making her calm words seem even more powerful. "Belief isn't really the issue here. The issue is that hundreds of people just recorded what sounds like members of the Trinity threatening and attacking a student. Even if everyone knows I created those sounds, the audio exists now." Marcus Wellington felt his stomach drop as he processed the implications of Maya's statement. Social media was unforgiving when it came to controversial audio or video, and the context surrounding those recordings often became irrelevant once they started circulating. Even if people understood that Maya had created fake conversations, the mere existence of audio that sounded like the Trinity making threats would damage their reputations permanently. "You can't possibly think this is ethical," Marcus said, his voice carrying the kind of moral authority that came from a lifetime of assuming his own righteousness. "Creating false evidence is fraud, plain and simple." Maya looked at Marcus with an expression that combined pity with contempt. "You just threw food at me in front of 400 people to teach me a lesson about knowing my place, and now you want to lecture me about ethics?" Derek Sullivan was still staring at Maya in shock, his mind struggling to process the fact that she had somehow turned his attempt at physical intimidation into a weapon against him. His hockey training had prepared him for opponents who fought back with force, but nothing in his experience had equipped him to handle someone who could manipulate reality itself through vocal manipulation. "This is insane," Derek muttered, though his voice lacked the aggressive confidence that usually characterized his speech. "No one person should have that kind of power." Maya tilted her head thoughtfully, as if Derek's comment had raised an interesting philosophical question. "You're absolutely right. No one person should have the power to humiliate others publicly just because they come from wealthy families. No one person should have the power to make other students feel worthless just because they received financial aid." Maya began speaking in Derek's voice again, but this time her words carried a note of genuine reflection rather than manufactured confession. "The difference is that Maya's power comes from talent and hard work, while our power comes from family money and social intimidation. If someone has to have power in this school, shouldn't it be the person who actually earned it?" The dining hall had begun to stir as students processed the implications of what they had witnessed. The Trinity's dominance at Clearwater Academy had always seemed natural and inevitable, based on their combination of wealth, athleticism, and social connections. But Maya had demonstrated that their power was actually quite fragile, dependent on the willingness of others to accept their authority without question. Students who had spent years avoiding the Trinity's attention were now looking at them with new eyes, seeing not invincible social leaders but insecure bullies, whose cruelty masked their own deep-seated fears of inadequacy. Maya's psychological analysis had stripped away the mystique that made their intimidation effective, revealing the ordinary human vulnerabilities beneath their polished exterior. Tyler recognized that the moment was slipping away from him, that his window for reasserting control was closing rapidly. The longer Maya continued to demonstrate her abilities and analyze their psychological weaknesses, the more damage she would do to their carefully constructed image of invincibility. "Fine," Tyler said, his voice taking on the hard edge that other students had learned to fear. "You want to play games with voices and psychology? Let's see how clever you feel when your scholarship gets revoked for creating fraudulent evidence against other students." Maya's expression didn't change, but something in her posture suggested that Tyler had just made a serious tactical error. "Are you threatening to use your family's influence to get me expelled for defending myself against your bullying?" Tyler's silence was answer enough, and Maya smiled again with the same unsettling confidence she had shown after being covered in food. "Thank you for clarifying your position, because now I think everyone in this room understands exactly what kind of person you really are." Maya began speaking in Tyler's voice again, but this time her words carried the weight of apparent confession rather than psychological analysis. "The truth is, I can't handle being challenged by someone smarter than me, so I'll use Daddy's money and influence to destroy her academically. If I can't win through merit, I'll win through corruption and abuse of power." Tyler's face went white as he realized that Maya had just created audio evidence of him apparently confessing to academic fraud and abuse of influence. Even though everyone had witnessed her creating the statement, the existence of such a recording would be devastating if it ever reached the wrong ears. "You're insane," Tyler whispered, his voice barely audible over the excited murmurs of the surrounding students. Maya switched to Marcus Wellington's voice, delivering her response with his characteristic intellectual precision. "Actually, what Maya's doing is perfectly rational. She's demonstrating that people who abuse power are vulnerable to having that abuse exposed and documented. The only thing that's changed is that now there's someone here who has the skills to fight back effectively." The dining hall had become a theater where Maya was performing a one-woman show about power, corruption, and justice, using the voices of her tormentors to deliver a message about the consequences of bullying. Students throughout the room were recording every moment, understanding that they were witnessing something unprecedented in Clearwater Academy's long history. Derek Sullivan tried one last time to regain some measure of control over the situation. "This has gone far enough. We're leaving." But as the Trinity began to turn away from Maya's table, she called out to them using Derek's own voice, the words carrying easily across the dining hall. "Wait! I want everyone to hear me apologize to Maya Chen for being a pathetic bully who picks on people because I'm too insecure to face my own inadequacies." Derek spun around, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "I never said that." Maya smiled and returned to her normal voice. "Of course you didn't. But wouldn't it be interesting if you did? Wouldn't it be refreshing to hear someone with your advantages actually take responsibility for the way they treat people?" The question hung in the air like a challenge that went beyond the immediate confrontation. Maya wasn't just asking Derek to apologize. She was asking him to examine the fundamental assumptions about power and privilege that had shaped his entire worldview. Marcus Wellington found himself considering Maya's question with unexpected seriousness. For the first time in his life, he was being forced to confront the possibility that his social status was built on nothing more substantial than inherited wealth and the willingness to maintain that status through cruelty toward others. Tyler Brennan was experiencing his own moment of unwelcome self-reflection, recognizing that Maya's psychological insights had been devastatingly accurate. He was indeed terrified that people would discover his ordinariness beneath the veneer of privilege and achievement that his family's money had purchased. The silence in the dining hall stretched on as students waited to see how the Trinity would respond to Maya's challenge. Some faces showed hope that the school's bullies might finally be forced to confront their behavior, while others displayed the kind of excitement that came from witnessing a complete reversal of established power dynamics. Finally, Tyler Brennan spoke, his voice carrying none of its usual commanding authority. "What do you want from us?" Maya considered the question carefully, understanding that her response would determine not just the outcome of this confrontation, but the future of social dynamics at Clearwater Academy. She had demonstrated her power to humiliate and destroy the Trinity. But she also recognized that true change required something more constructive than simple revenge. "I want you to understand that other people's dignity matters as much as your own," Maya said simply. "I want you to use your influence to protect people instead of tormenting them. And I want you to remember that real strength comes from lifting others up, not from pushing them down." The dining hall remained silent as students processed Maya's words, recognizing that she was offering the Trinity an opportunity for redemption rather than simply destroying them. Her response suggested a maturity and wisdom that made her earlier demonstrations of power seem even more impressive. Tyler looked around at the faces of his classmates, seeing a mixture of expectation, judgment, and hope in their expressions. For the first time in his life, he was being asked to earn respect through character, rather than simply commanding it through privilege and intimidation. Derek Sullivan and Marcus Wellington were experiencing their own moments of reckoning, forced to confront the reality that their behavior toward others had been observed and judged by hundreds of their peers. Maya's abilities had made it impossible for them to hide behind the comfortable fiction that their victims deserved their treatment. Maya remained standing beside her table, still covered in chocolate pudding and fruit salad, waiting to see whether the Trinity would choose growth or continued defiance. She had given them the tools for transformation. Whether they used those tools was entirely up to them. The next few moments would determine whether Clearwater Academy's culture of privileged cruelty would continue unchanged, or whether one scholarship student's courage and extraordinary abilities had created an opportunity for something better to emerge from the ruins of the old order. The silence in the dining hall stretched for what felt like an eternity, as Tyler Brennan wrestled with a decision that would define not only his remaining time at Clearwater Academy, but quite possibly the rest of his life. Maya's offer of redemption hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man, but accepting it would require him to abandon everything he had believed about power, privilege, and his place in the world. Tyler looked at Maya, still standing beside her table covered in the remnants of their assault, and for the first time saw her not as a threat to be neutralized, but as a person who had been genuinely trying to make their school a better place. The realization hit him with unexpected force, accompanied by a wave of shame that made his stomach clench with discomfort. "I'm sorry," Tyler said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly in the absolute silence of the dining hall. The words felt foreign in his mouth, unfamiliar after years of never having to apologize for anything. Maya tilted her head slightly, studying Tyler's expression with the analytical attention that had become her trademark. "What exactly are you apologizing for?" The question forced Tyler to confront the full scope of his behavior, not just toward Maya but toward countless other students who had suffered under his casual cruelty over the years. He realized that a simple apology wouldn't be sufficient. Maya was asking him to demonstrate genuine understanding of what he had done wrong. "I'm apologizing for throwing food at you to humiliate you publicly," Tyler said, his voice growing stronger as he found the courage to continue. "I'm apologizing for trying to force you to submit to our authority through intimidation and threats. And I'm apologizing for treating you like you didn't belong here just because you're on scholarship." Maya nodded slowly, her expression indicating that Tyler's apology was a good start but not yet complete. "And what about all the other students you've treated the same way over the years?" Tyler felt the weight of hundreds of eyes watching him as he processed Maya's question. Students throughout the dining hall were recording his every word, understanding that they were witnessing either the beginning of genuine transformation or the most elaborate performance in Clearwater Academy's history. "I apologize to everyone I've hurt through my behavior," Tyler said, turning to address the entire dining hall rather than just Maya. "I've used my family's money and my position on the lacrosse team to intimidate people who couldn't fight back, and I've justified it by telling myself that I was maintaining natural order." Marcus Wellington had been listening to Tyler's apology with growing discomfort, recognizing that his own moment of reckoning was rapidly approaching. Maya's psychological insights had stripped away the comfortable rationalizations that had allowed him to participate in years of casual cruelty without examining his own motivations. "Tyler's right," Marcus said, his cultured voice carrying the kind of authority that made his admission even more powerful. "We've been using our privilege as a weapon against people who had done nothing wrong except not being born into wealthy families." Derek Sullivan remained silent, his hockey player's mentality making it difficult for him to process complex emotional concepts like guilt and redemption. But as he looked around the dining hall at faces that showed a mixture of hope and skepticism, He began to understand that his choice in this moment would determine how he was remembered by his classmates for years to come. "I don't know how to do this," Derek admitted finally, his voice lacking its usual aggressive confidence. "I've never had to think about whether my behavior was hurting people. I just did whatever Tyler and Marcus wanted, and I told myself that made me loyal." Maya felt something shift in her chest as she listened to Derek's honest confession. His admission of uncertainty suggested genuine self-reflection rather than calculated performance, and she recognized that real change often began with acknowledging ignorance, rather than claiming sudden wisdom. "Not knowing how to change is different from not wanting to change," Maya said gently. "The fact that you're willing to admit you don't know how to be better is actually a good sign." Dr. Sarah Chen had arrived at Clearwater Academy just as the confrontation in the dining hall was reaching its climax, summoned by a phone call from Principal Morrison, who had been alerted to the situation by concerned teachers. She stood in the doorway of the dining hall, taking in the scene of her daughter covered in food while surrounded by hundreds of students hanging on her every word. Maya caught sight of her mother and felt a brief moment of embarrassment about her appearance, but Dr. Chen's expression showed nothing but pride as she watched her daughter handle an impossible situation with grace and wisdom that would have challenged adults twice her age. Principal Morrison appeared beside Dr. Chen, his face showing the kind of concern that came from recognizing that his school's carefully maintained reputation was balanced on the edge of a knife. The videos being recorded in his dining hall would either document one of the most inspiring moments of conflict resolution in prep school history, or they would provide evidence of institutional failure that could damage Clearwater Academy for years to come. Maya noticed the arrival of the adults but chose to maintain her focus on the Trinity, understanding that their transformation needed to come from internal motivation rather than external pressure. True change couldn't be imposed from above. It had to emerge from genuine recognition of the need to become better people. "The question now is what you're going to do differently going forward," Maya said, addressing all three members of the Trinity. "Apologizing is important, but it's just the beginning of the process." Tyler had been thinking about exactly that question during the brief pause in their conversation. "I want to use my position as lacrosse captain to create a mentorship program for younger students. Instead of using my influence to intimidate people, I could use it to help them adjust to life at Clearwater Academy." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, recognizing the wisdom in Tyler's proposal. "The sailing team could participate in something like that too. We have resources and connections that could actually benefit other students if we used them constructively instead of just maintaining our own status." Derek's contribution was more hesitant but no less sincere. "I don't really know what the hockey team could offer, but maybe we could start with just not being jerks to people. That seems like it would be an improvement." Maya smiled at Derek's honest assessment, appreciating his recognition that change didn't have to be grandiose to be meaningful. Sometimes the most important transformations began with simply choosing not to cause harm. "Those are all good ideas," Maya said, "but the real test will be how you handle situations where helping others might cost you something. It's easy to be generous when generosity doesn't require sacrifice." Tyler understood immediately what Maya meant. "You're talking about times when standing up for the right thing might make us less popular, or when protecting someone might put our own social status at risk." "Exactly. True character is revealed when doing the right thing comes with a price tag." Marcus felt a chill of recognition as he processed Maya's words, understanding that she was describing the exact situations that had led to years of moral compromise. He had participated in bullying not because he enjoyed causing pain, but because opposing the behavior would have threatened his position within their social hierarchy. "That's going to be the hardest part," Marcus admitted. "It's one thing to apologize when you're cornered and have no choice. It's another thing to keep choosing the harder path when no one is watching, and there are no immediate consequences for taking the easy way out." Derek nodded slowly, his expression showing that he was beginning to understand the complexity of the commitment they were making. "So how do we make sure we actually follow through? How do we keep ourselves accountable?" Maya considered Derek's question carefully, recognizing that he was asking for practical guidance rather than philosophical inspiration. "You hold each other accountable. Instead of enabling each other's worst impulses, you call each other out when you start slipping back into old patterns." The suggestion was simple but profound, requiring the Trinity to transform their friendship from a mutual protection society for bad behavior into a support system for positive change. Maya understood that accountability partnerships were often more effective than individual willpower when it came to sustaining difficult transformations. "That actually makes sense," Tyler said, his voice carrying genuine surprise at the elegance of Maya's solution. "We've been covering for each other's mistakes for years. We could probably be just as effective at helping each other make better choices." Dr. Chen had been listening to the conversation with growing amazement, recognizing that her teenage daughter was facilitating a level of conflict resolution that would have challenged professional mediators. Maya's combination of psychological insight, strategic thinking, and genuine compassion was creating an opportunity for transformation that none of the adults present could have engineered. Principal Morrison was experiencing his own moment of revelation as he watched the Trinity voluntarily commit to behavioral changes that years of disciplinary meetings and parental conferences had failed to achieve. Maya's approach had succeeded where traditional authority had failed, creating internal motivation for change rather than external compliance with rules. Students throughout the dining hall were processing their own complex emotions as they witnessed the complete transformation of their school's social dynamics. Some felt vindicated after years of suffering under the Trinity's casual cruelty, while others felt inspired by the possibility that even entrenched bullies could choose to become better people. Jennifer Walsh, whose thoughtless questions about Maya's scholarship status had inadvertently triggered the entire confrontation, approached Maya's table with obvious nervousness. "Maya, I want to apologize too. I didn't mean to make you feel bad about being on scholarship, but that doesn't excuse the fact that I did." Maya turned to face Jennifer, her expression showing no anger despite the role Jennifer had played in creating the situation. "Thank you for apologizing, but more importantly, thank you for recognizing that impact matters more than intent when it comes to harmful behavior." Jennifer nodded gratefully, understanding that Maya was offering her the same opportunity for growth that she had extended to the Trinity. "I want to do better. I want to think before I speak and consider how my words might affect other people." "That's all any of us can do," Maya replied. "Recognize our mistakes, commit to doing better, and hold ourselves accountable when we fall short." Bobby Martinez, the freshman who had been humiliated in the cafeteria 2 days earlier, had been watching the entire confrontation from a table near the back of the dining hall. His experience with the Trinity's cruelty had left him suspicious of their sudden transformation, but Maya's measured responses and insistence on accountability rather than revenge was beginning to convince him that genuine change might be possible. Sophie Chen, Maya's lab partner who had tried to warn her about the Trinity's influence, felt a complex mixture of admiration and concern as she watched her friend navigate the social and psychological complexities of the situation. Maya's abilities were clearly extraordinary, but Sophie worried about the burden of responsibility that came with such power. As the immediate drama began to wind down, students throughout the dining hall started returning to their normal lunch routines, though the conversations at every table focused on what they had just witnessed. The videos being uploaded to social media would ensure that news of the confrontation spread far beyond the walls of Clearwater Academy, potentially influencing discussions about bullying and power dynamics at schools across the country. Maya finally allowed herself to become aware of her physical appearance, chocolate pudding and fruit salad still clinging to her hair and clothes despite her attempts to wipe away the worst of the mess. The sticky sweetness of the dessert had become uncomfortable, and she was looking forward to cleaning up and changing into fresh clothes. Dr. Chen approached her daughter with a gentle smile, carrying a package of wet wipes that she had obtained from the nursing station. "Let's get you cleaned up, sweetheart. You've had quite an afternoon." Maya accepted her mother's help gratefully, understanding that the physical act of cleaning away the remnants of her humiliation would serve as a symbolic transition from victim to victor. The food that had been intended to shame her had instead become the catalyst for one of the most significant moments of her young life. Tyler Brennan watched Maya and her mother working together to remove the pudding from Maya's hair, and he felt another wave of shame as he fully comprehended what he had done. The casual cruelty of throwing food at another human being seemed even more appalling now that he understood Maya's character and capabilities. "Maya," Tyler said, approaching her table with obvious hesitation, "is there anything I can do to help? I mean, cleaning up the mess I made?" Maya looked at Tyler thoughtfully, recognizing his offer as another step in his transformation from bully to ally. "Actually, yes. You can help by making sure that what happened here today leads to real change at Clearwater Academy. Don't let this moment become just another story people tell about the time the Trinity got embarrassed." Tyler nodded seriously, understanding that Maya was entrusting him with responsibility for maintaining the momentum of positive change that her courage had created. "I won't let you down, and I won't let the school go back to the way things were before." Principal Morrison stepped forward as the crowd in the dining hall began to disperse, his expression showing that he was still processing the implications of what had occurred under his administration. "Miss Chen, I think we should schedule another meeting to discuss how the school can support the positive changes that seem to be emerging from today's events." Maya appreciated the principal's recognition that institutional support would be necessary to sustain the individual transformations that had begun in the dining hall. "I think that's a good idea, but any changes need to come from the students themselves, not from new rules imposed by adults." Dr. Chen felt a surge of pride as she listened to her daughter's wise response to Principal Morrison's offer. Maya understood instinctively that lasting change required internal motivation rather than external enforcement, and her insistence on student agency demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of human psychology and organizational dynamics. As Maya finally finished cleaning the worst of the food from her appearance, she took a moment to survey the dining hall and reflect on everything that had transpired. The Trinity was engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation about their future behavior, other students were discussing the implications of what they had witnessed, and the entire atmosphere of the school felt different than it had just hours earlier. Maya realized that she had accomplished something she had never intended when she first arrived at Clearwater Academy. Her goal had been simple invisibility, but circumstances had forced her to use her extraordinary abilities to defend not just herself but the principle that all students deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. The transformation wasn't complete, and Maya understood that real change would require sustained effort from everyone involved. But as she gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the dining hall, she felt genuinely optimistic about the future of her school and her place within it. Tyler, Marcus, and Derek approached Maya one final time as she prepared to leave, their expressions showing a mixture of gratitude and determination that suggested their commitments to change were genuine. "Thank you," Tyler said simply, "for giving us a chance to be better than we were." Maya smiled and shouldered her backpack, chocolate pudding still sticky in her hair, but her dignity completely intact. "Thank you for taking that chance. The hardest part is over. Now comes the real work." As Maya walked toward the dining hall exit with her mother, students throughout the room watched her passage with expressions of respect and admiration that would have been unimaginable just hours earlier. The quiet scholarship student had become a legend, but more importantly, she had become a catalyst for positive change that would benefit everyone at Clearwater Academy. The afternoon sun streamed through the Gothic windows as Maya and Dr. Chen made their way toward the parking lot, both understanding that this day had marked a turning point not just in Maya's high school experience, but in her understanding of her own capabilities and responsibilities. "I'm proud of you," Dr. Chen said as they reached their car, "not just for standing up for yourself, but for the way you handled having power over people who had hurt you." Maya considered her mother's words as they drove away from Clearwater Academy, understanding that the real measure of her character had been revealed not when she was being victimized, but when she had the opportunity to victimize others in return. Her choice to offer redemption rather than revenge had defined her as surely as her extraordinary vocal abilities. In the weeks that followed, the changes at Clearwater Academy exceeded even Maya's optimistic expectations. The Trinity's mentorship programs became genuinely popular among younger students, and their commitment to accountability proved stronger than their previous commitment to maintaining social dominance through intimidation. Maya's reputation as someone who would stand up to bullying spread throughout the school, creating a protective effect that benefited students who had never had the courage or ability to defend themselves. But more importantly, her example inspired other students to find their own ways of contributing to positive change in their community. The videos of Maya's confrontation with the Trinity eventually went viral, sparking conversations about bullying, privilege, and the power of individual courage to transform institutional cultures. Educational experts analyzed her approach to conflict resolution, while social media celebrated her as an example of how extraordinary abilities could be used for positive purposes. But Maya herself remained focused on the day-to-day work of being a good student and a supportive friend to her classmates. Her abilities had given her a platform for change, but her character had determined how she used that platform. Years later, when Maya was applying to colleges and reflecting on her transformative experience at Clearwater Academy, she would understand that the most important lesson she had learned was not about vocal mimicry or psychological analysis, but about the responsibility that comes with having the power to make a difference in other people's lives. The quiet scholarship student had found her voice, and in doing so had helped others find theirs as well. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.